Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. It's time to hear from the top Christian litigators in the nation who have come forward to tell us the truth and help us defend our faith.
Hear ye, hear ye. All rise. Faith on Trial with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano, is in session.
Welcome back. We're back this week live on tape. We were off last week. I hope everybody had an opportunity to listen to the program from back in September.
It was a wonderful encore presentation.
It was. Mike. Yeah. And but anyway, we are, like I say, live on tape again today. So we're taping our usual Thursday morning, and we've got a couple of nice guests coming up. But first of all, I'm Deacon Mike Mano, your host, and I'm here with the lovely and talented Gina No.
Good to be here, Deacon Mike.
With us. And,
yes, I'm looking forward to today's program and our guests.
Yeah, we have Chris Gacek, who is from the Family Research Council, and he's going to talk about a proposed treaty that the World Health Organization is proposing for the next pandemic.
I heard it has something to do with free speech.
It has a lot to do with not having free speech. And it takes a couple of shots at Christians and conservative Christians. So we'll talk to Chris and find out what the Family Research Council is saying about that. And then we're going to have our old friend Matt Lamb on, who knows all things college these days. He is the associate editor for the College Fix, and he's going to be talking to us about free speech on college campuses. And he's also going to be talking to us, if we have time, about a Iowa Community College president who was suspended because of his resistance to DEI re-education.
I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, well, we find those things.
Very good. Yeah. Yes, College Fix is a good organization. They have, not only does it give students on campuses the opportunity to publish, right? Strengthen their journalism skills, but it also helps us know what's going on in college campuses, both here in Iowa and nationwide.
It does. And I've mentioned this before. When I was studying journalism at Creighton, I would have loved to have the College Fix around because I could have done work for the College Fix and use that to get a job.
It's unbelievable the opportunities our students today have that you and I, when we were in college, did not have exposure to. So from that side, it's the colleges are really doing a good job working with their communities and their employers and really helping the students become adults and functional in our society.
That's right. Of course, back when I was in college, we only had beer, and that was the big thing.
Were you the era of Animal House, Deacon Mike?
Probably.
We got a new furnace at our house this week, and we have an Animal House poster in the basement, and boy, that technician he just wanted to take a real good look at that poster. I said, geez, you boys never grow up, do you?
No, we had fraternities at Creighton, but not fraternity houses.
Oh, okay. So they were in the dorms.
They were kind of limited. Yeah, we had parties.
You congregated.
I will someday. I'll tell the story of how we got caught with a beer keg on college campus at Creighton, and how we got out of it.
Oh,
interesting story.
Stay tuned, listeners.
Interesting story. We'll have to do that, and maybe they might revoke my diploma.
Oh,
when I tell that story.
It's been so long.
Everybody knew how we did it, and it was no.
You probably weren't the first fraternity to have tried that.
Yeah, well, we tried a lot of things. But we had a good time. Well,
yes.
It was a good time.
Well, now our students are writing for the College Fix, and we get to hear from them today.
I think I would have been better off doing that if I was when I was in college. But I was an ROTC grad, so I came out with a commission in the field artillery. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that service.
Yeah.
That's
wasn't a very good one, but I couldn't read a map. I couldn't climb a rope.
They didn't teach you all that by the time you got out?
Oh, well, they tried.
Oh, Deacon Mike.
There were some things that I just was incapable of doing. So,
well, you could have written for the Army if you.
Well, that's just it. That's just it.
Or been a JAG, maybe.
That's
even,
right. Yeah. Well, I wasn't. I didn't have a law degree then.
Well, no.
Yeah, I didn't have a law degree till later. Now, a friend of mine did. He was in the Air Force. He got out of the Air Force, got his law degree, went back into the Air Force as an officer and a JAG officer.
And did he enjoy that career?
Yes, he did.
Isn't that nice?
Yes, he did. A good friend of mine. He still comes back to the area a couple of times a year, and my wife and I take he and his wife out all the time. Yeah.
Very nice.
Good guy. We've kept
Very
in
nice.
time.
Yeah, those JAGs are real important.
Yeah.
In our military.
Yeah. More important sometimes than regular lawyers. Yeah.
Let's hope so.
All right. Do you have a prayer to open us up with?
I do. A prayer for peace today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world, peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of this earth. Turn to your way of love those whose hearts and minds are consumed with hatred. Strengthen us all in hope, and give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among the nations and in the hearts of all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. And we will be right back after these messages. And we're going to have with us Chris Gacek from the Family Research Council on the proposed WHO pandemic treaty. Stay tuned. You're listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we're back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we have with us Chris Gacek from the Family Research Council to talk about what started out as a proposed treaty, I guess now is an agreement. And you can, Chris, explain that to our listeners, from the World Health Organization about what to do in the event of another pandemic, or maybe just to do so they can get some more power.
Let me sort of go and kind of give an overview here real quick.
Yeah.
So the United Nations was founded in 1945. It came out of World War II. Basically the first specialized agency of the United Nations was the World Health Organization, and it came into, signed into existence in 1946, and I think it actually, had a physical presence a couple of years later, pretty shortly thereafter. And I think it served as a sort of a body that was. It didn't take a lot of time for it to become politicized in a lot of ways, because pretty soon, and this is true of all these international organizations, but they soon became kind of fixed with the. All of these organizations, the population controllers got in there and started pushing, population control and all these sorts of things through these health, linking up population control to health, like controlling disease, right? So there's
kind of like they use the environment for everything these days.
Sure, and that's what's going on now, right? They're linking these things. Well, anyway, so let me just sort of what I'm trying to say is that even though there was a time when I think it did a lot more sort of the traditional things that we think about in health roles, and they do a good amount of that too, like tracking malaria and things like this, or these kinds of localized disease and things that we sort of would expect them to do. What's essentially going on, let's say since 2000, is a sort of a generalized push to by a lot of people, the UN, but all these sort of globalist technocrat leaders around the world, and these sort of very rich oligarchs and people like this, Bill Gates, these foundations, these health foundations, and countries like the Chinese, right? They're trying to push and get countries to cede their sovereignty over domestic policies and health to international organizations that they control and that people in those countries don't control, who might resist their agenda. And I think this is now just so transparently obvious that this is happening, that it's really indisputable. But in the current context, the World Health Organization is using two prongs to essentially try to aggrandize its power. And so what happened recently was that Health and Human Services of the United States asked for comments about a draft of this pandemic agreement. It's 30 pages long, and it's under negotiation with all the countries. Meet every year in Geneva. That's where WHO is located, is in Geneva, Switzerland. So that's the immediate topic of this conversation. But there's another track which has to do with sort of the bureaucratic rules about how the World Health Organization operates and how they declare, essentially international health emergencies and who gets to declare them and what that means. And so that all sounds like, bureaucratic rules, it doesn't mean anything. Actually, that's sort of enormously important. And those negotiations are being conducted, completely in secret. And whenever stuff sort of pops out about it, it's all very bad and is taking away the rules from these sort of, kind of basically just administrative functionary rules to sort of power aggrandizing rules. And that's the direction that this pandemic agreement. So the agreement that's being considered, they don't call it a treaty because if it were a treaty, it would have to, the Biden administration and all these other governments don't want to have to submit treaties to their respective parliaments, or in our case, to the Senate. Because I don't think there would be any, I don't know, I'm not sure of this, but I don't think you could get 2/3 of the U.S. Senate to vote for this.
Doubt it.
Right, and so
I don't think you could get 2/3 of the Senate to vote for motherhood these days. But,
yeah, that's the thing. You don't really know. You'd think that you would have 35 Republicans who would vote against it, but I don't know. There are a lot of I don't know, not clear-thinking Republicans. So you never really can tell with these guys.
Now, originally when this came out, I heard of it as being a treaty. Did they start it as a treaty and then change?
Something. I think that they actually. I think that's true. I think that the original discussion or the way things, the sort of the parlance, maybe it was just loose talk, and the lawyers weren't talking that way, but it's kind of like, the public relations people were. I don't know that to that degree. I know that the document that we were looking at, the title on it is agreement.
Okay.
And remember, the president can, there are all kinds of executive agreements.
Right, and that's what I was going to ask you about
right.
now. The way it's set up now, this seems to be something that the president could enter into administratively.
Well, and that's what they will try to do. Let me just say, on both the international health regulation changes and on the this pandemic agreement, the Biden administration is all into. It's also, it's totally 100% behind these provisions that are ceding our sovereignty to these international organizations.
All right, let's talk about some of the provisions in this agreement that we would object to if we knew about them.
Well, let me just say one thing, that when you go and you look at the document itself, it has a sort of a set of principles at the beginning of it. And one of them is that it talks about a principle that is going to inhere throughout the entire document is this term, and it's known as equity, right?
Right.
Equity is not equality. Equity is a kind of one of these kind of neo-Marxist, critical theory terms. And in essence, what it means is it means redistribution of resources and power and technology. That's what this word is. It has nothing to do with being treated equally based on your status as a human being or being made in the image of God. It's a document that's revolves around this whole creation of a world in which there is all sorts of power redistribution. And then power redistribution means economic redistribution and intellectual property redistribution.
So the results are equal all over. That's
yeah. And that suffuses the terms of the document, right?
Okay.
So one of the things that you'll find in this document is there is a lot about supply lines. In other words, the notion is that in order to prevent the next great pandemic that's going to happen. There's a lot of, all of this is being used as a lot of fear-mongering, right, to get us to give away our liberties and our power, in the possibility that there might be some international health emergency. So what they're going to do is they want to have these sort of, reimagined lines of production where there's a lot of sharing, and they use the term sharing in essence, where the United States would basically give up 20% of its, let's say, vaccine production to the world. and we may have done more.
And that's equity.
Yeah, that's part of equity, right? 10% would be like, cash donation, but another 10% would just be an outright, handing over of product. Then there's a whole sort of, aspect to this thing that has to do with giving over or sharing intellectual property, and a sort of just a reimagined way of conducting all of these aspects of, supply chains and sort of the normal way that the United States would supply things to people in the world. They want all this infrastructure built, overseas, and it's in essence it's a kind of a gigantic redistribution scheme.
Yeah, it's DEI on steroids.
And in a way, yes, I think that's fair, and because that's what, when you see this term equity and it's in the document over 30 times, then that's essentially what's going on. That you're getting an entire critical theory, philosophy structuring this entire this whole effort. Now, one of the things that happens then is that there's also a lot in the document about setting up an entire set of labs and protocols. And some of this may, in other words, not everything in it is completely crazy. Some of these things, we do already, and some things are out, like just sharing of knowledge and these sorts of things. But there's a sort of a desire to set up and share like pathogenic materials, and it's almost like a Wuhan lab in every country, kind of. I mean, this is the way I kind of think of it. And it's like, well, that was a disaster. Yeah. So, but this is there's an element of when you're sort of looking at this, is that the African countries are, especially, there are a lot of African countries that are very good on the sort of their very negative response to the WHO, but there are a lot that are sort of in the slipstream of the WHO, and they look at it as like, Pfizer made all this money off of off the vaccines. We want our cut, right? And we want our share of all the these labs and all this money going around to all these sorts of things. These kind of resources about this. And so what essentially at one level has happened is that their vision of a pandemic response is very much focused on a sort of a internationalized kind of a. It's going to be kind of a boondoggle, right? And in fact, they do create an entirely new organization to implement this pandemic. It's in Articles 21 through 24 of the agreement. They're basically a whole new body to oversee and put regulations out with regard to the agreement, and then a whole secretariat, which basically means a whole organization of thousands of people, eventually, to fulfill the requirements of this document. Because the document is so sweeping, the way I describe it is it's not so much an agreement about pandemics, it's a political manifesto. It reaches every element of society, and perhaps the most troubling, right, is that it also has in it the notion of information control, right? We all hear this sort of information and disinformation. Well, they have, at the outset of the document in these sort of defining terms and things like this, they introduce a term. I mean, some people may have heard of this before. I've heard of information, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. They introduced this term called an infodemic. So it's like a pandemic except with information, right? So the infodemic has to be curtailed. It has to be stomped out because an infodemic is about there being too much information. Too much, right? It's not like we need more information to get to people through channels and let them make their own decisions. No, this unitary top-down and single, dimensional treatment of how their vision of how a pandemic is going to be managed, right? There's no dissent, right? And part of this is control of information. And one of the big problems they have with the infodemic of information out there, meaning all of the channels like yours and Substack and all of these different ways of people communicating, YouTube channels and podcasts, is that it creates discomfort with government policies and with the policies of international organizations. I mean, they actually say this, right? So it's absolutely about suppressing the ideas of other people about medical treatment. Yeah. And so
there's only one size fits all.
Exactly.
All right. Now, there are also some things in this agreement that would be negative toward families and children, and let's talk about the area of what they call reproductive rights.
Well, one of the things that happens is that now the agreement is not about these sorts of issues like in and of themselves, right?
Right.
It's not a treaty about or an agreement about abortion. But what you end up getting is these sort of concepts of things. They have an overlay, a sort of a scientific medical overlay that they call One Health. And One Health is a bit hard to describe, but it's like a general philosophical predisposition that oversees a lot of the scientific biological thinking. So you could go look it up on Wikipedia, and you would see a kind of a general description of it, although it wouldn't tell you everything you need to know. But it's a sort of a linkage from about everything, right? And so it's saying, some of this is like, we knew this in 1925, and we didn't need this term One Health, right? It's like, yes, we know that pathogens can come from, bacteria or, fungus in dirt, and that you have to clean your hands, right? I mean, this is like, we've known about washing hands and antisepsis and, these kinds of things, right? So, but the way that it's done here, it's sort of like a parallel in a way of equity. There's a sort of a cross-linkage that kind of blends everything together, and every element of life becomes this, seamless aspect of health. And one of the things that's really crazy is that the people who talk about One Health talk about things like species equity. And what that means is it's sort of downgrading in terms of the relative scheme of things, the sanctity of the human in relationship to animals. Now, I love animals. I don't want to see animals treated cruelly in any way. But, as a Christian, we know that human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. This is, straight from Genesis chapter 1. And the philosophy that underlies all of this is very humanist, and it's very dehumanizing in that regard. So let me just say that what happens here is all of these issues about, the environment, right? All of that is going to require, the environment is being threatened by too many people. Too many people requires, abortion and birth control and, these kinds of things, right? So once you get into this sort of frame of thinking, then, the next pandemic will be affected by, overpopulation. Too many people will be hard to treat people. I mean, they can link any kind of thing together, right? And it's sort of this, the hand bone connects to the arm bone, connects to the elbow, connects, right? Yeah, I mean, so however they want to take this Lego set and kind of build things at the time, and there's a sort of it's a kind of a Jabberwocky kind of jargon that they create. I mean, there's sort of the equity stuff, all that kind of critical race Marxist gibberish is very much like this. And there's a sort of a parallel to this. And the thing is, underlying the One Health concept, like I said before, is it's not completely wrong, right? It isn't even like mostly wrong. It's because we do know that science and all these, there are ecosystems, and animals and the life of other beings are connected together, and you can go and get a great drug like ivermectin because it's like growing as a fungus in some golf course in Japan where some guy discovered it, right? I mean, that's the way life is in the beauty of God's creation.
It sounds like what they're doing is they're taking basic scientific ideas and extrapolating them in such a way that it gives greater weight to one thing than another without allowing any dissent.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is a there is an elite, a technocratic managerial elite.
And we're not in it.
People you are not in it. Catholics and Christian Protestants and Orthodox Jews and people who have this view of, man is in the image of God. And this is what we said in our comment. I mean, I think this is the most important thing we said in our comment is we reject this view of the world, right? We look at man as and human beings in this central place with a special purpose given to them, by God, and that within this also, we believe in, principles of subsidiarity. We believe that the most effective way to fight a pandemic is to use information available through this miraculous tool of the internet to have, practitioners who are out in the field live figuring out how to treat patients as they're becoming sick and as, with drugs that already exist.
Yeah, and be able to compare treatments,
Yeah, exactly. And if we shared this information immediately, this is exactly what didn't happen in our pandemic, right, or recent pandemic,
now
because they shut it all down.
You made a comment. Now, this is to what department is taking?
Well, the comment period is over on this. Okay. But I'll tell you something. I'll tell you way to comment. But we filed our comments by January 22nd. Of this year, and it was with Department of Health and Human Services. But what I will say, here's the most effective thing you can do, as a listener or you personally or any of us. Look, there are a lot of details to this thing, and you can go, and I would say, just listen to shows like yours or to come to FRC and look at our documents and the things that we've published. And we have a daily news publication called The Washington Stand. I think we've had 2 or 3 articles that are really good. By one of our authors named Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson, right? I have it.
Ben Johnson's, Ben Johnson is just wonderful, right? So, and he's put information out there, and there are other, organizations that are, have put out good documents too. But what I would say to you is this, just, read those, look at those, contact your senator and your, member of the House. Now, a treaty isn't going to go to them. To the members of the House of Representatives, but they should hear from you because there's all sorts of issues related to funding and things like this and just the general principles involved here. But you say, look, I want this, the international health regulations, when that agreement is reached, and this agreement to both be considered by the United States Senate as treaties, that the president would have to get the advice and consent of the treaty of the Senate for these to go into effect. And I think that's the best vehicle that we have right now to channel our skepticism about this. And because if you have an actual, a Senate hearings and a kind of a markup of this and people looking at it, then there will be a better chance to have, Republicans and I don't know. There will probably be some Democrats who would oppose it. I don't know. Probably, maybe not.
Oh, there will be.
You'll probably get 30, 40 strong people who would at least go into this and really look into it and find out what's going on and take. We need to have a period where we look at this as a society and with our institutions and pull things apart from this, because it's just all being done in secret now. Very few people know about it. There are only a few organizations like ours tracking it.
And this cedes some of our authority as a nation to this organization.
Right.
And that's
the purpose of it.
We are running out of time here a little bit, but I want to give the website. It's frc.org.
ORG, right.
ORG. So anybody that wants any more information on this can go to that. And I think there are links. I've seen some things here that have links to other programs and other comments that people can find out more about this.
Exactly. Right. So, and you could do WHO and Family Research Council. You'll probably pull up a bunch of stuff, too.
I think we will, yeah. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
We were happy to have you here, Chris, and we wish you luck, and we will send people your way, frc.org.
It was a pleasure to be with you.
Certainly. Thank you. Chris Gacek, who is with the Family Research Council, and we will be right back after these messages. You are listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we're back. You're listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, and we have with us right now Matt Lamb, who is Associate Editor of the College Fix, and our guy who knows everything about what's going on in colleges, so we pick his brain every once in a while to find out. Matt, how are you today?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Certainly. All right, let's talk about free speech on college campuses these days. Is that getting better or worse?
Well, I think it's hard to tell, but certainly there's an ongoing growth of diversity, equity, inclusion, trainings, spending. So I would say, I guess it's getting worse, or it's going to get worse, because I do think DEI and free speech are inherently going to be in conflict, and that's something that you all have probably seen in Iowa, Northeast Iowa Community College, and we at the collegefix.com have seen at universities across the country.
Yeah, let's talk about the Iowa Community College here, where the president, I guess, has been suspended, and he's sued now.
And asked to go into some kind of DEI training.
Yeah, they wanted him into DEI retraining, kind of like the old Soviet re-education camps.
Right. So President Herbert Riedel is the president, or I guess he's on administrative leave, of Northeast Iowa Community College, and he's suing the Board of Trustees because they tried to get him to go through what he called a re-education on DEI, which he called a highly ideological and controversial movement favored by some at the college. When he took over, the DEI committee had all of these plans, he said, to train people on preferred pronouns, survey students on their sexuality, and talk to them about sexuality, gender, and race. And he said, no, we need to follow Iowa laws. Let's just focus on teaching, and we can respect employees and students in a way that they do feel included without excluding people or making them uncomfortable by broaching these topics.
And didn't the trustees have trouble with the way he was hiring new employees for the university or the college?
Well, yeah. So he was, he wanted to prioritize what he called viewpoint diversity. And it does say, we did report that he had some clashes with the administrators, and he says this has sort of led to the problem. And as you noted, he said, quote, that in the day-to-day management of the college, including personnel decisions, end quote, the Board of Trustees was interfering. And again, they hired him to run the university. I believe that Board of Trustees should have oversight into what the president is doing, but ultimately that the person should also have some freedom because they are the chief executive of the university. There should be, of course, the general objectives, the plans, and then that person should be tasked with the other staff with carrying out those plans, just like a company operates.
Under the Iowa law, in this case. Exactly.
Yeah, that was key to this, I think, was that the state legislature had passed some legislation last session about DEI and its use on college campuses, and it curbed the use.
Right, absolutely. And we've seen other states have taken similar action. So, I don't know exactly how that law applies to presidents. That was something that would probably come out in the lawsuit. But, this is certainly just one high-profile battle against DEI. We've covered professors who have sued over being forced to use personal pronouns, others that I think there's similar situations we've covered about professors or staff being forced to undergo DEI training. And, this is just a great example that it's not optional. It's not an optional workshop that the university offers if people want to learn about different cultures. It's mandated that you go through DEI training.
Okay, yeah, and they have no choice in the matter. And I think that's what was the problem with initially the problem with the president here was that he was being forced to do something that he said wasn't appropriate.
Right.
I know that the Iowa Board of Regents have initiated a plan to end diversity, equity, inclusion programs on the state university campuses. But the Iowa Board of Regents have no control over the community colleges in Iowa. Is that correct?
Yes.
So how does that impact? I mean, will that have some impact at all? Will they follow suit at the community college level? Is there a governing board over all of the community colleges in Iowa, much like the Board of Regents, or are they subject to just their individual trustees?
Unfortunately, you probably know more about Iowa politics than I do, but as you mentioned, the Iowa State University, University of Northern Iowa, and the University of Iowa have passed a proposal to abolish DEI in higher ed. The College Fix had a story about this just a couple months ago in November, and we had brought up that there are some very high-paid DEI deans or leaders. For example, the University of Iowa, the associate vice president for DEI makes nearly $375,000 per year in compensation. At Iowa State, it's VP for DEI. It has a total salary and benefits package of $343,000, and that's separate from a director of equal opportunity who makes more than $300,000 at Iowa State.
Wow. Now, the Board of Regents, as you mentioned, govern the Regents universities, the three that you just mentioned. In Iowa, the community colleges are run more like a school board would be run. Their members are elected, and then they make the decisions. It's much like a school district. And this was initiated back sometime in the 60s to make the community colleges stronger so that they wouldn't be lost in all this other stuff. And the community colleges in Iowa have worked out very well, although it doesn't sound like it's working out well in this case. But the president, from what I read in the stories that he carried, the president is saying, hey, look, the legislature has made some decisions here about DEI, and the regents are responding to it, so we should be responding to it and not forcing this stuff down everybody's throat. And that, I think, is the rub here, that he's got a conflict with his board, the trustees, whatever they call them, that are saying, no, we want to do all this whether you like it or not.
Right, and so look, to speak to his point, I'm not an attorney, so I can't speak too much exactly to the legal angle, but community colleges have a great opportunity if they do reject DEI to see increased enrollment. So, as you mentioned, since the public universities are getting rid of DEI, that will make them more attractive to students. Something the College Fix has found out recently, we did a report about enrollment in higher ed, is that male students, and you may know this, that male enrollment is generally down over the past 10 years. There's something like 1.4 million fewer people enrolled in college now than 10 years prior. 1 million of that is attributed to fewer men enrolling.
Wow,
but what's interesting is that they are choosing community colleges men. So community college enrollment is actually up. And this makes sense if you think about it, one, because a community college is better if you want to learn a hands-on trade that's more appealing to men. If you want to electrician, carpentry, auto mechanic, robot functioning.
I think at our local community college, they have mortuary science.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Someone's got to do it.
And you can learn to be a semi-driver, too, at the one here. And, so there's a lot of hands-on experiences there.
Absolutely. And a lot of these DI trainings, I think, are not appealing to men. Men tend to be more conservative. And a lot of these trainings, men tend to be targeted. If they're white males, if they're males, of course, we hear about, white privilege, white male privilege, the patriarchy, which I personally think patriarchy is great. Heterosexual privilege. So if you think about a 19-year-old guy who likes working with his hands, he doesn't want to go sit through a DI training at a public university. The community college where he can get right into learning about plumbing or truck driving is more appealing to him. And so I think from the standpoint of the community college serving its clients, which are really local students, right, and taxpayers, if they do get rid of DEI, it's a great opportunity for them to see even more, enrollment, particularly from men. But I think a lot of women would find it appealing as well.
Yeah, and also from the community college's standpoint, and having taught at a community college for a number of years, I understand this. The community colleges have academic programs, too, where you can get associate degrees, which many times are enough to work in your field. And if you want to go to a 4-year college, the 2-year college is usually fairly inexpensive, and those credits will easily transfer to a 4-year institution.
Absolutely, and a lot of community colleges, as you're saying, you can combine things. So you can imagine you train to be an electrician, and then maybe you also take some classes in accounting, business management that would allow you to run your own business, or perhaps you work for your family business and you want to get a marketing certificate so that you can, help them make more money, bring in more customers. And so that's why I think community colleges in Iowa and elsewhere have a great opportunity by rejecting DEI. So whether it's at this particular college or elsewhere, whether this president wins his lawsuit, of course, that will go through the courts and there will be attorneys arguing. But in principle, the community college should listen to what the president is saying about the harms of DEI.
Yeah. But now, nationwide, let's project this again across the nation and across college campuses nationwide. You think the rise on DEI is accelerating now? Is that what you're seeing?
Absolutely. So, for example, at the University of Michigan, the College Fix has written several articles, but one of our recent ones is that there are more than 500 jobs dedicated to DEI at the University of Michigan. And when we asked the university for comment, they said, well, that's not really accurate because DEI is part of everything we do, which is not particularly reassuring.
No, it's not.
And I think one thing we need to be wary of is the sort of papering over the problem. So the University of Michigan, several weeks after our article came out, and I'm not saying it's related to our article, but they passed a statement saying we promote, we support diversity of thought and viewpoint diversity, which sounds great, but the University of Michigan cannot have that while they have anti-racism fellows, DEI statements. And in fact, the University of Michigan several years ago said they would host, quote, a diversity of thought forum. This is after a controversy when a pro-life Catholic medical professor was going to give a short speech, not even about abortion, at a white coat ceremony. This is when new med students start, sort of like a, welcome to the college. Their diversity of thought forum was all liberals. They were all liberals talking about social justice, DEI, et cetera. So we need to be very careful as taxpayers, as observers of higher ed, that just because a university says we support freedom of expression, that doesn't mean they support freedom of expression, or we support diversity of thought. That needs to be seen in the way they act going forward. It has to be more than just a resolution passed at a meeting.
And we find in a lot of these cases, or we've seen over the years, as Eugene and I have covered them, that a lot of these are anti-religious edicts. I know here in Iowa, at the University of Iowa, we had several ongoing cases with the University of Iowa not wanting to recognize a Christian student group.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, so there's those examples. There's at the University of Idaho, there was several, I think it was a Christian Legal Society law chapter that ran into trouble after its members were asked by a LGBT student something about, well, why does your club, hold to what we would call, marriage, or right, what biblical view of marriage, heterosexual marriage, right, which is just marriage. They were asked, and he explained, and then later, they had all these investigations and complaints. At the University of Wisconsin, to just get further into this point, they had this big DEI seminar, and one of the speakers talked about Christian privilege. Well, something one of my reporters pointed out, that actually goes to UW-Madison, is that the university schedules final exams on Sunday. So while they're talking about Christian privilege, they force students to take exams on Sunday, which of course we as Catholics go to Mass. Other Protestants have their services. So they're talking about Christian privilege, but they're not seeing, right, that they're asking students to take tests on what is supposed to be a day of rest. And I know St. Thomas Aquinas would say you could do intellectual work on Sundays, but it still is a blind spot in terms of their understanding in my
Not a day of rest when you're a college student. It's a day of cramming. When you're coming up to
exactly
intellectual progress.
Yes, intellectual progress.
So the president at the Northern Iowa Community College has filed a lawsuit. And according to your article at the College Fix, the spokesperson for the university has said that they're working to actually fire him and let him go. What will happen if he wins this particular lawsuit? Will he acquire a financial advantage, or will he be hopeful to eliminate some of the trustees' edicts on the university to invoke this DEI philosophy?
So that will, of course, depend how it plays out. What I can talk about is other free speech lawsuits, particularly from students or student groups or professors, is oftentimes there is a policy change that comes as part of the lawsuit. A lot of the times the plaintiffs, they don't necessarily, it's not necessarily that they're winning a bunch of money for themselves, but they are affecting change. So there was a professor, I believe, out of Ohio who won a lawsuit. He was Christian, and he didn't want to use someone's preferred, transgender pronouns. As part of the lawsuit settlement, or as part of the case, the university agreed that no one would be forced to use someone's, quote, preferred pronouns. Sometimes there's other policy changes. So, for example, you had referenced some Christian groups that were denied approval. So sometimes when those groups win the lawsuit, part of the change is not just that one group gets approved, right? But it's that the university eliminates from their handbook, from their rules, the arbitrary decision-making that allows groups to get blocked. So in this case, it will just depend on how exactly it plays out. But if he wins, it is very possible, as you mentioned, that they would, they might eliminate certain DEI requirements. They might be barred from making anyone do DEI training. That will just depend on how the case plays out.
So we root for the president.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
And he wins his suit.
We root for the taxpayers, really.
For the
it's
right.
lovely that
we root for free speech.
Exactly.
Free speech. We can't evangelize without it.
Exactly.
All right, Matt, I want to thank you for joining us today. We're pretty much out of time here right now, but we always like visiting with you, bring you in when we have issues involving college campuses and what's going on there. And it's a little scary to sit back and to not only to see what's going on college campuses, but literally what's going on in our elementary and high schools these days. But anyway, if you want to find out more about what's going on, it's the collegefix.com. Collegefix, all one word, .com, and you can find out what Matt and his colleagues are doing there.
Wonderful.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you for joining us. And Gene and I will be right back after these messages. You're listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. And we are back. You're still listening to Faith on Trial on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. Gina, interesting what we talked about today.
Well, it was eye-opening for me. I might be naive, but I really thought that the World Health Organization was a altruistic organization for the purpose of collecting data and solutions for public health individuals worldwide, which sounds like a great thing to have. But I kept thinking, I would like to have an international organization to be able to promote my ideas and philosophies.
And to be able to curb others.
Right.
Curb others. And we see this permeating through society.
So it's a power grab, really. And it's a platform for people with power and influence to be able to spread their messages and control the world, really. And I'm glad that our friends at the Family Research Council are opening our eyes to what's really going on over there.
Yeah, and it's a shame that this is being promoted by our own administration.
And the other thing is, I'm a big promoter of, like, when you have a pandemic and we're well past the initial stages of that, taking a look back and seeing what we could have done better or more efficiently or more equitably or equally, depending on which of those you'd like to use. But it doesn't sound like this particular agreement would have, if it had been in place prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, would have done anything to
No, but
change
some of the
the
things you're
trajectory.
talking about with this agreement, they tried to do during the pandemic, which was misinformation. They capped what they thought was misinformation. So instead of having doctors experiment with whatever treatments and seeing which one is coming out the best, they shut all that stuff down. Said there was only one narrative that you could use.
Exactly. And there isn't a week that goes by that I don't see another story about information that was kept from the public on vaccines or the spread or the transmission rates or the whatever that we weren't allowed to know at the time right. or was filed away, even at our own CDC, which is frightening to me.
And, of course, Matt is always good bringing us up to date with what's going on college campuses and that. And it sounds like the DEI infection is spreading.
Well, I have so much respect for administrators and people in leadership positions that do the right thing and stick to their ethics. So congratulations to President Riebe.
We'll file this case and see where it ends up. And
that's right.
My guess is it will end up being settled somewhere, and the settlement will occur probably like Matt is suggesting. There'll be an agreement that certain things won't be done anymore.
Or we'll filter up to the legislature, and the governor will sign a bill that makes what the trustees are doing illegal.
That's right.
We'll see.
That's right. All right. It's about time to end. I think we're out of time. So we'll end with our Defender's Prayer. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. That's it for today. Don't forget this weekend to go to church and to take your kids along with you. Until next time, God bless you, and keep safe.
Our freedom of conscience and religion is being challenged by laws and regulations imposed by secular society. Faith on Trial, with Defender of the Faith, Deacon Mike Mano. Faith on Trial on Iowa Catholic Radio, iowacatholicradio.com, and the Iowa Catholic Radio app.
Support for Faith on Trial and Iowa Catholic Radio provided in part by Imogene Ingredients.